The advice and opinions expressed by Dr. Grant-Pichet and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice.
Dr. Doreen Grant-Pichet is
Dr. Doreen is an expert in autism.
Doreen Grant-Pichet.
Dr. Grant-Pichet.
Dr. Doreen Grant-Pichet.
Dr. Doreen Grant-Pichet is a visionary in the field of autism. Now you can ask her questions on Ask Dr. Doreen. The question is, hi Doreen, I came across your information in a book I read recently, Saving My Son. I knew I had to get in touch right away. My 8-year-old son on the spectrum has significant social and language gaps, and I've been struggling to help him. I was hoping to get some advice on the best approach, what the best approach will be given his age. We missed the early intervention bus, and I will always have this as a regret, but keen to do the right thing now and fast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And my goodness, like as parents, we already have enough guilt for everything. Yes. You do not need to have guilt about this because I don't look at it really as having missed the bus. I feel like you're taking a different bus. And if you didn't get early intervention, that probably indicates that your child was not struggling severely so that it wasn't recommended to you, intensely, let's say. But regardless, everybody needs to realize, I think, that early intervention is just ABA, but more intensely. So more hours per week, more hours per day than it would be when you're a little bit older. And honestly, the only reason that it is, there's a couple of different reasons. I want to talk about why it is so important to do early intervention. One reason is that when the idea with early intervention, by the way, is that, years and years ago, we did research that showed that if you do enough hours, and we're talking about somewhere between 30 to 40 hours per week of a one-to-one teaching through ABA techniques, your child is rapidly learning when they're very young. And when I say early intervention, we're talking about starting as soon as the child's diagnosed and as early as 2. Sometimes we even start before 2, as soon as the child is diagnosed, right? And the reason this is valuable is that there's nothing else going on in the child's life. So the child has tons of hours available. They're not in school, and we are able to intensely teach, or think about it as intense tutoring, right? Very, very comprehensive and lots of hours of teaching, which enables the child to not form bad habits in regards to using challenging behavior to communicate, and B, catch up. And that is the whole point of early intervention, is giving the child a lot of teaching to help the child catch up to peers. Because if you start with a child and you're doing 30, 40 hours a week, you're doing that at 2 and at 3 and at 4 and maybe even at 5. By the time the child is, let's say, 6, they've learned a lot of stuff. And so it is now easier to integrate the child in school and help the child kind of mainstream and go on their path, right? And that's the goal of ABA. The goal of ABA has always been, what can I do to help support the child so that they can go on and live a healthy, happy, successful, independent life? Now, if you don't start very early on, let's say you start when the child is 5, now you have other things that you need to incorporate into the teaching curriculum, right? So up to this point, you were working on things like language and, just basic communication, social behavior, play, adaptive, self-help skills, all the things that we need. But when your child turns 5 and up, now you need to add academics. And academics, let's face it, take a lot of time, right? So that becomes an additional, burden in terms of adding it to the curriculum. And whether you're doing homeschooling or you're in school, your child is in school, it's taking away a chunk of time from all the other stuff that we want to teach. That is the reason that it just becomes harder when the child is a little bit older. It doesn't mean that ABA doesn't work. ABA continues to work through the lifetime. So if I had the opportunity in a perfect world, if I had the opportunity to take a 10-year-old and prioritize the things that parents want this child to learn, a lot of times parents would select things like, I want my child to communicate with others appropriately. I want my child to not tantrum. I want my child to have a social life and have friends and so on. They wouldn't prioritize things like, I want my child to learn math. That's just how it is. Like, parents often will tell me, God, if I could choose, I'd be choosing language, obviously. But the problem is we don't have that luxury, right? Once the child hits 5, we have to start incorporating some academics. Those are the laws, right? And so our timing is restricted by that, and that's the only issue. Now, you start at 8. It doesn't mean that your child can't benefit from this. In fact, they could benefit significantly. All you have to do, no matter what age your child is starting at, 2, 8, or 20, it does not matter. All you have to do is do a very detailed assessment of what the individual's needs are when you are starting, and then regular intervals after you start. So the concept is, I'm trying to think of, okay, so I'm about to, not you'll laugh because my life doesn't allow me to do anything, but let's assume I've had remember a couple of years ago, I decided when I had more free time, I went back to taking French classes because I missed my French, right? I was like, I need to get fluent again. Obviously I've forgotten everything again now, but I need to do that, right? And if I was to go back and take a language course in one of the languages that I used to be fluent in, I would need to do an assessment of where I am right now, right? And that is very important for every person, because you don't want to waste your child's time by just giving them some sort of cookbook approach of like, oh, hey, at this age, this is what we teach. That's not how it works. These programs are very, very individualized. So you need to assess what your child's challenging issues are. So like, does your child actually how do they communicate? Do they communicate by hitting, tantruming when they're frustrated? What are the challenging behavior issues? Because that's part of ABA. And what are the skills that have fallen behind? Like, my child should be able to do this at age 8, but instead he's doing this. And that's very important to get the right answers to this assessment. We built an assessment many years ago called Skills. It's a curriculum, but it starts with a very, very comprehensive assessment. It's accessible to everyone online. And what you can do is, in fact, Shannon, can you remind me? I think what we should do is try to just make the assessment available for free for everyone, anyone who wants to take that assessment. It's lengthy, I will warn you, but it's awesome. And we standardize that. It's really, really good. It's age standardized. So if you go in and say, my child is 8, it'll give you everything that a typically developing, let's say, 8-year-old should be doing in the areas of language, play, social behavior, cognitive behavior, executive functions, adaptive skills, academic even. There's an academic portion, and motor. So that's 8 areas of curriculum, and you can answer all the questions and you'll get a pretty large set of things that your child should be able to be doing right now. And now it's up to you how you want to teach those. And obviously in Skills, it links to an ABA program. So it basically says, if your child isn't doing this, this is how you teach it, right? And it just, that's how we built it. But it's valuable in and of itself, regardless of how you want to approach this. And at 8, you will need to prioritize. You'll need to say, okay, I can see that there's a lot of areas that I need to work on academically, or let's say from a, social or cognitive perspective or executive function perspective, but my priority is language, right? I want to work on his language. You can determine that. When I, as a psychologist and behavior analyst, when I look at these, I will start by looking at, like, what are the most important pressing things in a child's life? Sometimes it's things like safety, which comes before everything else. And sometimes it's just social communication. So then I'll focus on that. And I'll also look at, realistically, what's the time commitment that the parents and the family can give to this? Because if you're limited in the time that you have available, then I need to really prioritize and be realistic, right? I don't want to throw 200 lessons at you if you have 10 hours a week.
Yeah.
Whatever your availability is or your child's availability is, and whatever you commit to this, it should be realistic. And then you start teaching. And obviously, from my perspective, the best teaching techniques are behavioral techniques, but there are other techniques as well. And you start teaching, and as your child masters something, you go to the next and the next and the next. And so it isn't as if you've missed the bus. It's just a different bus.
Don't forget, you can watch Ask Dr. Doreen live every Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. Pacific time. We hope to see you there.